Okay, let's continue. In conclusion, Bhagavad Gita is a transcendental literature which one should read very carefully. Gita Shastram idam punyam yah patet prayatah puman. This is from Gita Mahatmya, first verse, first half. If one properly follows the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, one can be freed from all miseries and anxieties in this life. And one's next life will be spiritual. Vishnu padamavapnoti bhayashokadi varjitaha. He will attain the abode of Lord Vishnu. There is also a further advantage. Gita Chayana Shilasya Pranayama Parasya Cha Naiva Santi Papani Purvajanma Kritani Cha. If one reads Bhagavad Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Lord, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. Gita Mahatmya 2. Then Prabhupada explains why the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. Because a person who has read Bhagavad Gita very seriously and with all consciousness, giving his uh, life and energy, everything, with all of that, he is studying the Bhagavad Gita. In other words, with all seriousness. It means that he is interested in obeying Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita. Obedient reading. Not that he is reading and he is disobedient to Krishna. Not disobedient reading. For such a person, Krishna removes the reactions of his past misdeeds because that person will surrender unto Krishna's lotus feet. The Lord says very loudly in the last portion of Bhagavad Gita 18.66, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshishyami ma shuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Thus the Lord takes all responsibility for one who surrenders unto him, and he indemnifies such a person against all reactions of sins, past sins. Because one who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead in all seriousness will never intentionally commit even one sinful activity. Malan nirmochanam pumsam jalasnanam dine dine sakragitam mritasnanam samsaram malanashanam. One may cleanse himself daily by taking a bath in water. But if one takes a bath even once in the sacred Ganges water of Bhagavad Gita, for him the dirt of material life is altogether vanquished. This is the third verse, Gita Mahatmya. गीता सुगीता कर्तव्या किमन्यैः शास्त्रविस्तरैः या स्वयं पद्मनाभस्य मुखपद्मात् विनिसृता. Because Bhagavad Gita is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Padmanabha, one need not read any other Vedic literature. One need only attentively and regularly hear and read Bhagavad Gita. Gita Sugita Kartavya. One should very loudly sing the Bhagavad Gita. You should read, recite, hear. Because when you loudly recite, you naturally hear. In the present age, people are so absorbed in mundane activities that it is not possible for them to read all the Vedic literatures. But this is not necessary. This one book, Bhagavad Gita, will suffice. Because it is the essence of all Vedic literatures, and especially because it is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Gita Mahatmya 4. As it is said, Bharatamrita Sarvaswam Vishnumatrad Vinistratam Gita Gangodakam Pitva Punarjanma Na Vidyate. One who drinks the water of the Ganges attains salvation. So, what to speak of one who drinks the nectar of Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita is the essential nectar of the Mahabharata, and it is spoken by Lord Krishna himself, the origin of Vishnu. Bharatamrita Sarvaswam. Bhagavad Gita is the essential nectar of the Mahabharata. It is the nectarian all in all of Mahabharata. Mahabharata was spoken so that people would study the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita comes from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Ganges is said to emanate from the lotus feet of the Lord. Of course, There is no difference between the mouth and the feet of the Supreme Lord. But from an impartial study, we can appreciate that Bhagavad Gita is even more important than the water of the Ganges. सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनंदनः पार्थो वत्स सुधीर भोक्ता दुग्धम गीतामृतम महत्. This Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, the essence of all the Upanishads, is just like a cow. And Lord Krishna, who is famous as a cowherd boy, is milking this cow. Arjuna is just like a calf. And learned scholars and pure devotees are to drink the nectarian milk of Bhagavad Gita. If we take this translation of Bhagavad Gita, Mahatmya, text 6, then it should be understood that Gavaha in Sanskrit grammar is in plural, Prathama Bahuvachana. Sarvopanishadaha is in Samanadhikarana with that. And they are in plural, it indicates that Bhagavad Gita is being very respectfully referred to. In this case, Gitamritam, or the nectarian milk of Bhagavad Gita, refers to the teaching of Sharanagati, Sharanagati Shiksha. There's another meaning to this verse, a much more commonly understood meaning. It is also presented here. Here. This verse is quoted by Shankaracharya in his Gita Dhyana, which Prabhupada translated. It was versified by Hayagriva Das, Prabhupada's disciple, on, I think, on Prabhupada's request or with his permission. But nevertheless, this translation is originally by Prabhupada. Prabhupada also wrote a commentary on this verse. The Upanishads are like a herd of cows. Lord Krishna, son of a cowherd, is their milker. Arjuna is the calf. The supreme nectar of the Gita is the milk. And the purified man of purified, and the wise man of purified intellect is the drinker. So here the Upanishads are compared to the cows. Many Upanishads are compared to many cows, and Bhagavad Gita is compared to the milk from these many cows. This is the commonly understood meaning of this verse. Okay, let's get back. But this meaning also fits in when we understand that there is a single cow named Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita. By understanding Sarvopanishadaha Gavaha to be written in the plural, Sanskrit plural, to indicate respect. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitameko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantras Tasya Namani Yani Karmapyekam Tasya Devasya Seva. The final verse of the Gita Mahatmya. In this present day, people are very much eager to have one scripture, one God, one religion, and one occupation. Therefore, Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam. Let there be one scripture only, one common scripture for the whole world, Bhagavad Gita. Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva. Let there be one God for the whole world, Sri Krishna. Eko Mantrastasya Namani. And one hymn, one mantra, one prayer, the chanting of his name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Karmapyekam Tasya Devasya Seva. And let there be one work only, the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Notice that this covers all the needs of one's life. You need to, of civilized life, you need to follow a set of principles and divine scriptures, revealed scriptures, the divine scriptures revealed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead are that. But if you are confused about having so many scriptures, then You can just follow Bhagavad Gita, which is the essence of all scriptures. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gita. Eko Deva. One worshipable supreme deity. One prayer. Hare Krishna, Vishnu Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. One set of activities. Service to the Supreme Personality of God with body, mind, and words. Krishna Seva. The disciplic succession. Evam parampara praptam imnu rajashiyo vidapu, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 4.2. This Bhagavad Gita as it is received through this disciplic succession. Krishna, Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, Madhva, Padmanabha, Nrihari, Madhava, Akshobhya, Jaitirtha, Jnanasindhu, Dayanidhi, Vidyanidhi, Rajendra, Jayadharma, Purushottama, Brahmanya Tirtha, Vyasa Tirtha, Lakshmipati, Madhavendra Puri, Ishvara Puri, Nityananda, Advaita, Lord Chaitanya, Rupa, Swarupa, Sanatana, Raghunatha, Jiva, Krishnadas, Narottam, Vishwanath, Baladev, Jagannath, Bhaktivinoda, Gaura Kishore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This is a disciplic succession. From Krishna, it comes to Brahma first. We know from Srimad Bhagavatam, from the Gopalatamani Upanishad also, that Brahma was a direct disciple of Krishna. That Narada is a disciple of Brahma is well known from Bhagavatam. Vyasa's discipleship of Narada is also clear from Srimad Bhagavatam. That Madhva was Vyasa's disciple is stated in the standard biography of Madhvacharya, written by his junior disciple Narayana Panditacharya and Madhva Vijaya, as well as in Madhva's own writings. We notice that the Madhvacharya accepts only Vyasadeva as his guru. Padmanabhan, Nrihari, Madhava, and Akshobhya are understood to be Madhvacharya's immediate direct disciples. All four are god brothers. But each one succeeded the next. Jayatirtha is an initiated disciple of Akshobhya Tirtha. Padmanabha Tirtha, Nrihari Tirtha, Madhava Tirtha, Akshobhya Tirtha, then Jayatirtha. Jayatirtha is a famous name in the Madhva circles. Jnanasindhu, Dayanidhi, Vidyanidhi, Rajendra, Jayadharma, Purushottama, Brahmanya Tirtha, Vyasa Tirtha. These are all Mathadhipatis, Peethadhipatis. And if we check the Madhva tradition in Karnataka, they also have Mathadhipati Parampara lists, and we see there similar lists. Then Lakshmipati, Madhavendra Puri, and then Ishvara Puri. Nityananda and Advaita were also disciples of Madhavendra Puri. Lord Chaitanya was initiated by Ishvara Puri. And then we have Rupa, Swarupa, Sanatana, and then Raghunatha and Jiva, and then Krishnadas, Narottam, Vishwanath. And here, one thing should be noted. This parampara appears to be until, let's say, Vyasatirtha. In fact, up to Madhva. It appears that this is primarily a Shiksha parampara, because if you take this Padmanabhan, Nrihari, Madhava, Akshobhya, from the point of view of initiation, they are actually god brothers. So the lineage has to be a Shiksha lineage here for it to be considered a lineage. A Mathadhipati lineage is automatically a Shiksha lineage because it's a lineage of authorities. And one of the things that you are meant to do when you become subordinate to an authority is you have to accept the Shiksha. So it is naturally Shiksha line. Of course, all of them had Diksha Gurus who had Diksha Gurus who had Diksha Gurus, so there are also Diksha Guru lines. But that is not what Prabhupada is presenting here. In line with Bhagavad Gita 4.2, which also talks about not a Diksha line, but it talks about a Shiksha line. One has to receive a bona fide mantra that he is worshipping through a mantra parampara. But one should also receive instructions on how to engage in that mantra upasana from somebody who has received such shiksha. So that is another track, one can say, with the same names, but it could be with different tracks. Rupa comes after Lord Chaitanya. Raghunath comes after Rupa. They don't have a Diksha relationship at all. Krishnadas does not have a Diksha relationship with Raghunath or Jiva. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami clearly mentions in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Rup Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath, Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunaths are his 6 Shiksha Gurus. Narottam Das was certainly not an initiated disciple of Krishnadas, he was an initiated disciple of Lokanath Goswami. Here's another Shiksha link. Vishwanath Chakravarti appears 4 persons after Narottam by Diksha calculations, by the consideration of Pancharatrik Mantra Diksha. But nevertheless, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has placed him immediately below Narottam. Not very surprising, because Narottam Das Thakur was a fully liberated soul, and Vishwanath Chakravarti was also a very exalted personality. Just as here, Vyasa is beyond the reach of the humanity of today. But Madhvacharya met him and learned many things from him. Twice he went to Vyasadeva in the Himalayas, met him, spent time with him, was instructed by him. So if this could happen, Vyasa, who is generally uppercut to human beings, would help Madhva. Why not Narottam, who also became uppercut, helping Vishwanath? Then Baladev Vidyabhushan, Jagannath Das Babaji. Baladev Vidyabhushan did not have a Diksha relationship with Vishwanath Chakravarti, nor did Jagannath Das Babaji have a Diksha relationship with Baladev Vidyabhushan. Then Bhakti Vinod. Very obviously, Bhakti Vinod was a follower of Jagannath, not an initiated disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji. Gaura Kishore was not an initiated disciple of Bhakti Vinod, but Gaura Kishore Das Babaji accepted Bhakti Vinod Thakur as a Shiksha Guru. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati accepted Gaura Kishore both as his Diksha Guru and Shiksha Guru. Prabhupada also accepted Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati both as his Diksha Guru and Shiksha Guru. So, from Lord Chaitanya down, we notice that it's a Siddha Parampara, not just an ordinary Shiksha Parampara. At the very least, it is a Shiksha Parampara. You can trace out a mantra lineage. In fact, somebody has done that task on paper of tracing out how the mantra has come to them. But this is actually Shiksha line. Okay, now we will shift over to chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita. I initially had the idea of taking up a small portion of chapter 2, but later I decided to move to this portion, chapters 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Then we come back to 2.11 and come all the way to 12 and then come to chapter 18, because this portion from chapter 13 to 17 deal with Pramana and Sambandha, the source of valid knowledge, and Sambandha Gyan, Tattva. And from Krishna's instructions from 2.11, it begins from 2.11 all the way to chapter 12. This deals with Abhidheya, Abhidheya Kriya, and Prayojana, the Purushartha, the means to attain the goal and the means to attain the goal. And that is also further summarized in chapter 18 up to text 66. So I'm going to go in that way. But let me just read out only the translation from 1.1 to 2.10 that sets the scene. I'll just read out the translation, I will not explain it. It is useful to get a basic idea of how the scene has been set for Lord Krishna to speak. Dhritarashtra said, "O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the battle of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do?" Sanjaya said, "O king, after looking over the army arranged in military formation by the sons of Pandu, King Duryodhana went to his teacher and spoke the following words. O my teacher, behold the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupada. Here in this army are many heroic bowmen equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjuna, great fighters like Yudhana, Virata and Drupada. There are also great heroic powerful fighters like Drishtaketu, Chekitana, Kashi Raja, Purujit, Kunti Bhoja and Shaibya. There are the mighty Yudhamani, the very powerful Uttamauja, the son of Subhadra and the sons of Draupadi. All these warriors are great chariot fighters. But for your information, O best of the Brahmanas, let me tell you about the captains who are especially qualified to lead my military force. There are personalities like you, Bhishma, Karna, Kripa, Ashwatthama, Vikarna, and the son of Somadatta called Bhurishrava, who are always victorious in battle. There are many other heroes who are prepared to lay down their lives for my sake. All of them are well equipped with different kinds of weapons and all are experienced in military science. Our strength is immeasurable and we are perfectly protected by grandfather Bhishma, whereas the strength of the Pandavas, carefully protected by Bhima, is limited. All of you must now give full support to grandfather Bhishma as you stand at your respective strategic points of entrance into the phalanx of the army. Then Bhishma, the great valiant grand desire of the Kuru dynasty, the grandfather of the fighters, blew his conch shell very loudly, making a sound like the roar of a lion, giving Duryodhana joy. After that, the conch shells, drums, bugles, trumpets, and horns were all suddenly sounded, and the combined sound was tumultuous. On the other side, both Lord Krishna and Arjuna, stationed on a great chariot drawn by white horses, sounded their transcendental conch shells. Lord Krishna blew his conch shell, called Panchajanya. Arjuna blew his, the Devadatta. And Bhima, the voracious eater and performer of Herculean tasks, blew his terrific conch shell, called Poundra. King Yudhishthir, the son of Kunti, blew his conch shell, the Ananta Vijay, and Nakula and Sahadeva blew the Sughosha and Manipushpaka, that great archer, the king of Kashi, the great fighter Shikhandi, Drishtadimna, Virata, the unconquerable Satyaki, Drupada, the sons of Draupadi, and others, O king, such as the mighty armed son of Subhadra, all blew their respective conch shells. The blowing of these different conch shells became uproarious, vibrating both in the sky and on the earth. It shattered the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra. At that time, Arjuna, the son of Pandu, seated in the chariot bearing the flag marked with Hanuman, took up his bow and prepared to shoot his arrows. O king, after looking at the sons of Dhritarashtra drawn in military array, Arjuna then spoke to Lord Krishna these words. Arjuna said, O infallible one, please draw my chariot between the two armies so that I may see those present here who desire to fight and with whom I must contend in this great trial of arms. Let me see those who have come here to fight, wishing to please the evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra. Sanjay said, O descendant of Bharata, having thus been addressed by Arjuna, Lord Krishna drew up the fine chariot in the midst of the armies of both parties. In the presence of Bhishma, Drona, and all the other chieftains of the world, the Lord said, just behold, Partha, all the Kurus assembled here. There, Arjuna could see within the midst of the armies of both parties his fathers, grandfathers, teachers, maternal uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, friends, and also his fathers in law and well wishers. When the son of Kunti, Arjuna, saw all these different grades of friends and relatives, he became overwhelmed with compassion and spoke thus. Arjuna said, My dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth drying up. My whole body is trembling. My hair is standing on end. My bow Gandiva is slipping from my hand and my skin is burning. I'm now unable to stand here any longer. I'm forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. I see only causes of misfortune, O Krishna, killer of the Keshi demon. I do not see how any good can come from killing my own kinsman in this battle, nor can I, my dear Krishna, desire any subsequent victory, kingdom, or happiness. O Govinda, of what avail to us are a kingdom, happiness, or even life itself, when all those for whom we may desire them are now arrayed on this battlefield? O Madhusudana, when teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives are ready to give up their lives and properties and are standing before me, why should I wish to kill them, even though they might otherwise kill me? For maintainer of all living entities, I am not prepared to fight with them even in exchange for the three worlds, let alone this earth. What pleasure will we derive from killing the sons of Dhritarashtra? Sin will overcome us if we slay such aggressors. Therefore, it is not proper for us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra and our friends. What should we gain, O Krishna, husband of the goddess of fortune, and how could we be happy by killing our own kinsmen? O Janardana, although these men, their hearts overtaken by greed, see no fault in killing one's family or quarreling with friends, why should we, who can see the crime in destroying a family, engage in these acts of sin? With the destruction of the dynasty, the eternal family tradition is vanquished, and thus the rest of the family becomes involved in irreligion. When irreligion is prominent in the family of Krishna, the woman of the family become polluted. And from the degradation of womanhood or descendant of Krishna comes unwanted progeny. An increase of unwanted population certainly causes hellish life, both for the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performances for offering them food and water are entirely stopped. By the evil deeds of those who destroy the family tradition and thus give rise to unwanted children. All kinds of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated. O Krishna, maintainer of the people, I have heard by disciplic succession that those whose family traditions are destroyed dwell always in hell. Alas, how strange it is that we are prepared to commit greatly sinful acts, driven by the desire to enjoy royal happiness. We are intent on killing our own kinsmen. Better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, were to kill me unarmed and unresisting on the battlefield. Sanjay said, Arjuna, having thus spoken on the battlefield, cast aside his bow and arrows and sat down on the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief. chapter 2. Sanjay said, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudan Krishna spoke the following words. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, my dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy. O son of Putha, do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. Arjuna said, O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counterattack with arrows and battle men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship? It would be better to live in this world by begging than to live at the cost of the lives of great souls who are my teachers. Even though desiring worldly gain, they are superiors. If they are killed, everything we enjoy will be tainted with blood. Nor do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. If we killed the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live. Yet they are now standing before us on the battlefield. Now I'm confused about my duty and I've lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I'm asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it, even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. Sanjay said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent, or descendant of Bharata. At that time, Krishna, smiling in the midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief stricken Arjuna. Okay, let me also read out this one verse, 2.12. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So, the first thing Krishna does is he chastises Arjuna. And then he begins by describing the essence of scriptures from the next verse, which we will see later on. Uh, so, right now, let's shift to chapter 13. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's method of teaching is first he teaches us Sambandha, then Abhidheya, then Prayojana. Since chapters 2 to 12 deal with Abhidheya and Prayojana, and 18 also, at least the second half of 18. And since chapters 13 to 17, they deal with Pramana and Sambandha. I wanted that we understand Sambandha first, Sambandha and Pramana first, before stepping into Abhidheya and Prayojana. I hope that this will give a better understanding to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So let's move to this section, chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. Chapter 13. Arjuna Vacha, Prakritim Purusham Chaiva, Kshetram Kshetragyamev cha, Etad Veditumicchami Jnanam Yayam cha Keshava. Shri Bhagavan Vacha, Idam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetram Ityabhidhiyate, Etad Yo Veti Tam Prahu Kshetragya iti Tad Vidaha. Arjuna said, I wish to understand all of this. Nature, the enjoyer, the field, the knower of the field, knowledge and the object of knowledge. O Krishna, the personality of Godhead said, O son of Kunti, this body is called the field. And he who knows this body is called the knower of the field. This is stated by those who know this. Arjuna said, "O my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field and of knowledge and the object of knowledge." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field. And one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." Okay, let's examine Srila Ramanujacharya's commentary. Then we will see Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan's commentary. And then we will see Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Vidvat Ranjan commentary. And then we'll come back to Prabhupada's purport. This is chapter 13. Sri Ramanuja. पूर्वस्मिन् शक्ये परमप्राप्यस्य परस्य ब्रह्मणः भगवतः वासुदेवस्य प्राप्त्युपायभूत भक्तिरूप भगवदुपासनाङ्गभूतं प्राप्तुः प्रत्यगात्मनः याथात्म्यदर्शनं ज्ञानयोग कर्मयोग लक्षण निष्ठाद्वयसाध्यम् उक्तम्. In the first set of 6 chapters, the direct perception of the individual soul who is attaining the Supreme Law is described. This realization of the soul is actually meant to be achieved upon becoming fixed in what has been characterized as the platforms of Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. This realization of the self as being different from the body, of the individual self as being different from his body, is a preliminary part of the process of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of bhakti, which is the means to attain Lord Vasudeva, who is the ultimate goal to be achieved. And he is the Supreme Brahman and Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, the Vedic methodology is first engage in Karma Yoga and become free from basic anarthas, impurities, lust, anger, greed, and so on. Of course, in remembrance of Lord Krishna. And then engage in Jnana Yoga in remembrance of Lord Krishna. And become self-realized. After becoming self-realized, engage in bhakti in order to attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the Vedic system. So the first 6 chapters talks about attainment of self-realization. मध्यमेन च परम प्राप्य भूत भगवत तत्व याथात्म्य तन माहात्म्य ज्ञान पूर्वक ऐकांतिक आत्यंतिक भक्ति योग निष्ठा प्रतिपादिता. In the middle 6 chapters, the platform of bhakti yoga has been presented. What kind of bhakti yoga? Aikantika Atyantika Bhakti Yoga. That kind of Bhakti Yoga which is singularly focused on the Supreme Lord. And it is of the absolute type. Absolute engagement in Bhakti Yoga, singularly focused on attaining the Supreme Lord. In other words, this is not the sort of bhakti yoga that is engaged in by those who are artho jigyasurartharthi type. Uh, but prior to the engagement of such bhakti yoga, one should know about the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the ultimate goal. One should know about his nature and one should know about his greatness. So that has been presented in the middle six chapters. Atishayita Aishwarya Apekshanam Atmakaivalya Matra Apekshanam cha Bhakti Yogaha Tat Tat Apekshita Sadhanam Iti cha Uktam. And it is also stated that for those who are engaged in Bhakti Yoga, to attain an abundance of opulences, material opulences, these are the uh, arthas, artharthis, who are this is the goal anchored for by them. They want an abundance of material opulences in the next life, of course. In Vedic civilization, calculations are generally done for the next life because we cannot die and the body cannot live. Um, so for them, as well as those who are only interested in isolating the soul from matter, impersonal, impersonalistic liberation. For these two categories of people, in simple words, those who are interested in bhukti and mukti, uh, the means to attain these is also bhakti yoga. That has been stated in the middle six chapters. Idanim, uparitana shatke, prakriti पुरुष तत्संसर्ग रूप प्रपंच ईश्वर याथात्म्य कर्म ज्ञान भक्ति स्वरूप तत् उपादान प्रकाराः च शक्कद्वयोदिता विशोध्यन्ते. Now in the last six chapters, certain subjects which had been mentioned in the previous two sets of six chapters, that means in the previous 12 chapters, are clarified. These subjects are the factual nature of Prakriti, Purusha, the conditioned souls, the nature of them coming together, which constitutes the manifested world, actually, and the nature of the Supreme Lord, and the ingredients for engaging in the activities of Karma, Jnana, and Bhakti, as well as the nature of Karma, Jnana, Bhakti. These are all clarified in the last six chapters. Okay, then तत्र तावत् त्रयोदशे देहात्मनोः स्वरूपं देह याथात्म्य शोधनं देह वियुक्त आत्मप्राप्त्युपायः विविक्त आत्मस्वरूप संशोधनं तथा विधस्य आत्मनः च अचित् संबंध हेतुः ततः विवेक अनुसंधान प्रकारः च उच्यते. Within the last six chapters, in chapter 13, the topics that are described are the nature of the body and the individual self inhabiting that body, a clarification regarding the nature of the body, the means to attain the soul as being distinct from the body. In other words, to realize the soul as being distinct from the body, the means that is also brought out here. A clarification of the nature of the self when it is distinguished from matter, the cause of becoming related to this non-conscious matter, the cause of the soul, which is actually distinct from matter, mm, to become related to matter, and the means of pursuing viveka, or discrimination, spiritual discrimination, which is helpful in moving towards the path of self realization and so on. All of this is brought out here. He does not have the first verse that we have. The first verse that we have, Prakritim Purusham Chaiva, appears in the manuscripts of Bhagavad Gita in the Madhva Sampradaya, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur included it. In certain manuscripts, it does not occur. Ramanujacharya has not commented on it. Sri Vedanta Deshika does note it in his sub-commentary that this verse is there, but because Sri Ramanuja didn't comment, he also leaves it like that. Anyway, let's go into the verse as explained by Ramanujacharya. Idam Shariram. Okay, all right. Idam Shariram. Devaha aham, Manushyaha aham, Stulaha aham, Krishaha aham iti Atmana Bhoktra Saha Samanadhikaranyena Pratiyamanam Bhoktuhu Atmanaha Arthantarabhutam Tasya Bhogakshetram iti Sharira Yathatmya Vidbhihi Abhidiyate. This body is described by those who know the nature of the body as the field of experience, the field of enjoyment. Enjoyment here does not actually mean experience of exclusive delight. It means the experience of pursuing such delight. Material experience. Bhoga also means experience. It is a field of experience. How exactly it is this body appears to the individual self, who's the material experiencer, as being identical to him by means of the conceptions. I am a deva, I am a human, I am fat, I am thin. But actually, this body is something quite different from the self. It is the field of material experience of that self. That is described as the field of experience, that this body is experienced, is described as the field of material experience of the self. Who describes it like this? Those who are aware of the nature of the body. Etad avayavashaha sanghata rupena cha idam aham vedmi iti yah vedti tam vedyabhutat अस्मात् वेदितृत्वेन अर्थान्तरभूतं क्षेत्रज्ञ इति तद्विदः आत्मयाथात्म्य विदः प्राहुः. And those who know the distinction, those who know the factual nature of this individual self, they say that the one who knows this body part by part or as a whole, the person who thinks I am this, or I know this, the one who is aware of this body, who is aware of the body part by part, or is aware of the body as a whole, that person who is aware of this body, he is described by those who are aware of the nature of the self as Kshetrajya, the one who is aware of the field of his material experience. he is something quite different from that body, because he is the one who is aware, and the body is that which is experienced. So you have the experiencer as being different from the experienced. यद्यपि देह व्यतिरिक्त घटाद्यर्थानुसंधान वेलायां देवः अहं मनुष्यः अहं घटादिकं जानामि इति देह सामानाधिकरण्येन ज्ञातारम् आत्मानम् अनुसन्धत्ते, तथापि देह अनुभव वेलायां देहमपि घटादिकम् इव इदम् अहं वेद्मि इति वेद्यतया वेदिता अनुभवति इति वेत्तुः आत्मनः वेद्यतया शरीरमपि घटादिवत् अर्थान्तरभूतं तथा घटादेः इव वेद्यभूता शरीरादपि वेदिता क्षत्रज्ञः अर्थान्तरभूतः. Even though while one is contemplating about objects such as a pot, which are different from the body, uh, uh, the idea that I am a deva, I am a human, and I know the pot and so on. He contemplates on himself while identifying himself with the body. Still, while experiencing his body, he thinks, I know this body, just as I know the pot and so on. So, he is the one who is experiencing the body as that which is being experienced. So, therefore, the body, just like the pot and so on, is something else from the experiencer, the individual soul. So, therefore, the Kshatragya, the one who experiences the field of matter, is quite different and is the experiencer of the body also, which is that which is being experienced, like the pot and so on. सामानाधिकरण्येन प्रतीतिः तु वस्तुतः शरीरस्य योत्वादिवत् आत्मविशेषणता एकस्वभावतया तत् अपृथक्सिद्धेः उपपन्ना. Now, this perception of the body as being equated with the self is because the body factually has the nature of being a quality of the self in material existence, just as the nature of a cow or another animal is always present with that cow or the animal, because this body cannot exist separately from the soul. This perception that the body is a self naturally arises in this manner. So the idea is this: the body cannot exist without the self. Just as, take for instance, the features of a cow. The cow has certain features. The moment we talk about a cow, immediately in the mind, the features of a cow come to the mind. Immediately it comes up. It's an animal which may have horns, it has 4 legs, and it has a dewlap. In other words, all those who have experienced a cow, they know what a cow is. These are actually features of the cow that come to our mind. We may not be seeing a cow in front of our eyes, but we have these features of the cow that we have assembled in our mind when we talk about cow. Because a cow cannot exist without the features of the cow. The features of the cow are inseparable from the cow. Similarly, the soul activates the body. The body cannot function without the soul. It requires it for its existence. The soul leaves the body will disintegrate. The body will no longer be the body that we know of when the soul existed in the body. तत्र वेदितुः असाधारण आकारस्य चक्षुरादिकरण अविषयत्वात् योग संस्कृतं मनः विषयत्वात् च प्रकृति सन्निधानात् एव मूढाः आकारम् एव वेदितारं पश्यन्ति. In this regard, because the experiencer, the soul, has a form which is uncommon, which is not common with the body. It is Sat, it is Chit, it is Ananda. These features don't exist in the material body. And this soul, because it has such features which are not common with the body, they are not perceivable by the eyes and other sense objects. They are beyond the range of the perception of the physical organs of perception, such as the eyes. However, the soul is perceivable to the mind that is purified by the yoga system. The yoga system means, first of all, you come to the platform of karma yoga, proper karma yoga, then proper jnana yoga, then proper bhakti yoga. So then that system purifies the mind and one is able to see. So because the soul cannot be perceived by the physical sense organs, but it can be perceived by the mind which is purified through the yoga system, culminating in bhakti yoga. And the individual self in the presence of Prakriti is perceived by foolish people as having the form of Prakriti. It is perceived as having a material form. So this is how they see the experiencer, the soul. Tatha cha vakshyati. And he will say this, Lord Krishna will say this. Utkramantam sthitam vapi bhunjanam va gunanvitam vimudhananu pashyanti jnanachakshushaha iti. Those who are very bewildered, they do not perceive the soul leaving a body or being within a body or experiencing the body or being filled with various characteristics. They don't perceive. Who perceive the self? The self's jnana chakshusha. Those whose eyes are filled with spiritual knowledge, they perceive.